Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I am back out here at the hangar and going to be doing some work again over the next 5 or 6 days or so. So it is currently a Wednesday afternoon. I got out here last night early this morning. My flight was actually delayed, so I didn't end up getting in until about 3 o'clock this morning. And then first thing this morning, I got up and I went and got my first round of the vaccine, which is great. And then I went and bought a bunch of stuff from 3 different hardware stores. I had to go to Lowe's, Home Depot, and Ace to find all the stuff that I needed. So I essentially wasted an entire day, but we are gonna jump on it and make up for it by working late into the night. So now that we're back out here, I know that last video I told you that we were going to work on, I think there was kind of 3 things. We were going to work on the bathtub, finishing up the waste, the plumbing waste with the bathtub, maybe erecting a wall and standing that up, and start working on the HVAC with installing the mini splits. So as it turns out, we are not going to be able to do that this trip out. What happened is my dad lives a lot closer than I do because I live in Alabama and I'm obviously up here in North Texas. So I've been shipping these things to my dad's house, and he was going to bring them out when he came out to meet up with me and work on the house. But you probably wouldn't believe it, but my dad is also building his own house, and my brother is completely renovating a 1950s house in Houston. And my dad just spent a week in Houston with my brother, and I think he deserves some well-earned time off. So he is not going to come out and work with me over these next 5 or 6 days. And as such, the bathtub and the mini splits are sitting in his house, so they are not here for us to get started. But that's really not a big deal. After the framing is done, over here, but after the framing is done, there's just a bunch of stuff that have to happen before sheetrock. There's really not any particular order that you have to get those things done in, so there's lots of stuff for me to do. So we're going to do we'll have a little bit of a change of plan, and let's show you what we're going to try and work on this time out. Okay, so I have a lot of kind of small projects that I'm going to be working on, things that are easy for me to do by myself. The next thing, which I'm actually going to start off doing first, is I am going to run a sub panel off of this panel up here and then on the other side of this main I-beam. I don't know if you remember from my last video, but I mentioned how it was impossible, or I shouldn't say impossible, but it would have been tough for me to run all my plumbing vent lines. I had to make that one vent line that ran east-west through all the ceiling joists or the floor joists for the second floor, because I couldn't route that vent line through this main I-beam. Well, this main I-beam is going to kind of serve as an obstacle when I'm doing my electrical work too, because my electrical is all over here on this side of the I-beam. So if I want to run power to all the house, 2/3 of the house is on the other side of that I-beam, I'd have to run it up here, through here, somehow get around this I-beam, and then I keep running it to whichever floor joist I need to run it through, and then I can shoot it over south towards wherever it's going to poke down through the wall. So what I've decided as a good way to get around with that is I'm going to mount a secondary panel right around here somewhere. And this panel, I'm going to run a 100 amp breaker and run some 4-gauge wire from that panel up to this panel, and then I bought a 100 amp service panel here that I will install to do the electrical for the house. So I will probably do almost all the electrical from the house out of this panel, and then it'll all be running off of a 100 amp breaker coming from my main primary panel. And that way I only have to run one big piece of conduit from this panel over to the sub panel that'll run all of the conductors that will power the rest of the house. So I'm actually going to jump and start on that first, I think, because that is where I've never installed a sub panel off a house before. I've watched some YouTube videos how to do it, and I know my dad's done it several times, so he'll be a good resource if I need to call and ask him some questions. But I'm gonna jump on that because that's the most likely thing that I'm gonna be missing stuff for. And if I don't have all the stuff that I need, I'm gonna have to make another run into town to buy supplies. So I'm gonna probably jump on that tonight. I measured out that I think I need about 30 foot. It's about a 30-foot run for me to get the power from the main service panel, the main load center, up to the sub panel that I'm going to install. So I think I got enough electrical conduit. I got some angle iron here to try and mount the box on the wall, and then of course I have just a whole slew of electrical stuff here that I'm going to use to get started with. Okay, so I haven't even started working yet, and we've already made some mistakes. So this is the interior load center, inside panel that I bought, and I bought it because I was trying to get the Square D brand. Because the Square D brand is what they had used when the contractor put the first panel in, and I was trying to get it so that they were the same panel and would use the same breakers, so I wouldn't have to worry about, I could just go buy Square D breakers and they were all going to be the same. What I didn't realize when I bought it, that the Square D QO is different than the Square D Home series that I have, and this actually uses different breakers. So it should still work as far as installing a sub panel. All it knows is it's getting power from the hots that are coming in. It doesn't know that it's coming off of a Square D breaker, a home stock or Square D home breaker. So the panel will still function, and I don't think it's worth my time to take it back to the store, change it out, and get a Square D home version. Just so that I'll have matching breakers. So it's kind of a bummer, but I'm just going to roll with it, and I'm going to have to remember that I got to buy the QO breakers for the sub panel and the Square D home breakers for the main panel. I don't know if they're interchangeable, if they'll both connect or not, but they do look a little bit different. The QO breakers, when they trip, they have this window that shows like a red that they've tripped. That really doesn't do anything to me because you can tell which ones have tripped without seeing the red square. So I don't know if there's any difference other than that. I'm sure there is, but we're just going to roll with this panel because it would take me an hour and a half to run back to town, return this one, buy a new one, and bring it out. The other reason that I bought this one, I thought I was getting the deal because it came with some breakers. I don't know all exactly what it came with, so let's open it up and take a look. So yeah, looks like a box. Came with the front, which is good, and then there's the inside of it. You see right there. So the main breaker, 100 amp, turn your power off. Where your hots come in are here. It also came with, like it said on the box, it came with 3 20 amp breakers and 2 30 amp breakers. So it came with some breakers, came with some service barriers, safety first, to install those to make sure it's de-energized when you're working on it. It won't be energized when I'm installing it. I'll get it all installed and hung and everything before I run power to it. But those are certainly a good thing to have, and all the hardware you need to hook it up. So let's get working on it. I am going to be done with that for tonight. I ran out of elbows, so I didn't know how many elbows I needed, and I just bought 6. Ends up I need a lot more than that. So I got the panel mounted on the wall, and I started running the conduit back towards the old box, and everything's going pretty good. I'm happy with how it's turning out, but I just need to make sure that I have to get up tomorrow and go get some more elbows, and I'll probably get some 45s and stuff just in case. But we can take a look at it and see what it looks like. So we got the box mounted on the wall. The conduit drops down, runs across this way. Put some 2x4 blocks, which I had to cut the foam away, and I screwed those blocks into that metal girt up from below, and then I screwed some brackets down to hold it in place. Drops down through here and disappears under the second floor. And here is where it comes back out. It's actually going to go all the way over and then hug this joist and go back this way along this joist. And then it's going to pop up through back above right through that hole right there. So it'll pop up right there. It'll hug. I'll put some brackets holding it down to those floor joists there. It'll run through here. I'll have to drill holes through this kind of girt, which is a support for the window. I'll do the same. I'll have to drill a hole through this girt right here through the window. It'll go ahead and come down here. It'll drop down, and then it'll follow on the top of this girt behind the stairs until it gets to right here. Have to drill a hole right through here, and we'll run it down into this box. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4 more elbows. So I'll go get those tomorrow, and I'll try and get this finished up. Okay, it was kind of a pain, but I finally got all the conduit run that's going from the original main box. It snakes over here, comes up here, hugs along this wall, kind of loops up and drops down, where it pops out here, juts around the I-beam, and then goes back up to the second floor there. Comes up here, comes over, and comes into the new sub panel. So the sub panel is hung, the conduit is run. I'm actually ready to start doing some electrical stuff. So that's pretty exciting. So we're going to go ahead and pull the power cables through the conduit and get a wire run from here down to here. So I'm short, probably 4 or 5 foot short. Bummer. Okay, so I have been doing some research online, and against my better judgment, what I've decided to do is I've decided to order some big, heavy-duty splices for, this is 4-gauge copper wire. The splices that I ordered are good for like all the way to 2-gauge. And they're insulated and they look real beefy, real meaty. So I'm gonna give them a shot as opposed to pulling all this wire out. Maybe you didn't notice because it was all in a time lapse, but running this wire just through all the bends and turns, because it's so heavy, it took me like 3 hours just to run this wire through the conduit. And the thought of pulling it all out of the conduit and trying to return it, which I don't think they'll take it back, because I've kind of scuffed it and dinged it up some. So not only the time and effort to pull it out, and the lost cost, because this 4-gauge wire, I got 4 rolls of 30 feet, so I got 120 feet total, and they charged me almost $200 for that 4-gauge wire, and to have to take it and have to buy, I need to buy 4 rolls of 40 foot if I was to pull it all out and replace it. So we're looking, $250 in additional cost. So I am going to attempt to put some of these big meaty splices in. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put some junction boxes in right here to hold the splices.
The next day.
Okay, I got all my splices in. Each one of the splices is inside one of these junction boxes. They only had 3-way junction boxes, so I just blanked off the third side. That weird little nubbin sticking up on top into the right R. But I got each one of the splices in each of the junction boxes, and they're each color-coded. We got red for one of the hots. We got black for the other hot, white for the neutral, and it looks real dark on camera, but that is actually a green for the ground. I know that when you bring power into a subpanel, you don't have to bring it in with 4 wires. You don't have to have a separate ground and neutral, but I had enough cable, and I didn't know when I bought the box if it was going to have a floating neutral in it or not. So I went ahead and just bought enough cable for 4 cables. It certainly won't hurt anything to double up and put a ground on the ground bar and a neutral on the neutral bar, even though on this panel they are tied together already. But we'll go ahead and hook all 4 of those up. So we got lots of excess cable here. Of course, the conduit route we've already been over a bunch of times. And then you can see on this other side, I have all the rest of the cable just kind of coming out of the box, temporary for now, until I can wire it into a breaker. Well, all right, here it is. Here is how I wired in my sub panel. So the 4 cables coming in, I have the green, which I use to indicate ground. It comes in behind here and ties into this ground bar. Once again, the other end of these cables is hooked up to nothing. So this entire panel is cold. There is no power in this panel at all. So you can pull these off. I have a red and black here, which I use to indicate hot, and I have one red that ties into this lug here to feed this side, this bus here, and then I have the black that feeds into the same thing over here. Right here, and then my white, which I use to indicate neutral, I have tied into the neutral bar. So this is how I've tied in my sub panel. Now on the other end that ties into the main panel, I will tie the white, which I've labeled on the other side as well, will tie into the neutral bar. The green will tie into the ground bar, and then the red and the black will tie into the 2 hots on the 2-pole circuit breaker. The problem is I have been to Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, and Sutherland's Home Base. I've been to just about every hardware store in Amarillo, and no one has a 100 amp 2-pole breaker in stock. I guess they're really desirable right now and no one can keep them. So that I'm gonna end up having to order one online, and I am not gonna be able to finish this trip out. It will not arrive out here before I leave. So I'm gonna have to put this project on hold until next time I come out. But it is essentially all done. The hard part's all done. All that's left to do is to tie in the other sides of the cable into a 100 amp breaker, which I will tie in to the main box here. But like I said, that'll have to be done at another date. I ran our first circuit for this house. So I just installed a breaker and wired it into this plug here. That'll do a couple things. As soon as I can get a 100 amp breaker to put into the main box to power the sub panel, I'll have a plug and a circuit already wired in to test everything and make sure it's working. And this will be the first outlet in a circuit of plugs that I'm gonna run upstairs. So eventually, right here along this kind of horizontal girt, I'll have outlets every 6 to 8 feet all the way around it to get power up here to plug stuff in. So that's the first kind of outlet in this circuit, and we'll start daisy chaining them along. Okay, so we are looking at the primary panel, the main panel that the electrician wired into my house before I started working. So I tried Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, Elliott's Electrical Supply, and Dealer's Electrical Supply, and no one had a Square D Homeline 100 amp 2-pole breaker. So I went ahead and just bought a 50 amp breaker, temporary, and I ordered a 100 amp breaker online. It seems that there's a huge shortage nationally, and people are buying them and scalping them on Amazon for like double price. So I ended up paying double price for this particular 100 amp breaker that I have coming in the mail. But with this 50 amp breaker, I was able to test and make sure my sub panel is properly working. So here from my my 2-pole breaker, and everything is hot right now. I have red coming in. I have a red main coming off of one pole, black coming off the other pole. And then underneath, I have my ground and my neutral tied into my ground and neutral bar. So the electrician that wired this in, they're not doing the kind of new style system where you have a separate ground and neutral bar. All these circuits that you're looking at here, with the exception of this circuit, which I installed for the well pump, all the rest of the circuits were already installed, and you can see that he wasn't doing a separate ground and separate neutral bar. But anyways, here is the, right now it's a 50 amp, but will eventually be a 100 amp breaker that'll run my whole house from the sub panel. So let's go look at the sub panel. So here we have the 4 lines coming in. We have the red hot going kind of to this left hot bar, the black hot coming in to this hot side, the neutral tied into this kind of neutral ground, and the ground tied in over here. It's actually tied into that back bar, which I'm kind of using as a ground bar. So we can test. So I can put one side of my voltmeter to the hot, the other side to the neutral bar, and I can see that I have 125 volts. I can go the other way, so put one side to the hot, other side to the neutral. You can see I also have 125 volts. So everything is working the way it's supposed to be working. And then kind of the last kind of good test is I added this 20 amp breaker, which the only thing on this breaker is this outlet right now. And I get my old handy dandy plug tester, and it indicates that I wired that plug in correctly. So everything appears to be working as I wanted it to. So I now have power to my sub panel, which I can use to run power to the house. Well, all right, guys, that is going to do it for this video. It has been a crazy, hectic last 4 or 5 days, but I have to take off and go to work today. So we did accomplish quite a lot while I was out here. Kelly got the front door painted. We got the boxes that hide, false walls but underneath all the sinks built and painted. We got the sub panel that will power the sub panel on the second floor that I'll use to power the whole house installed. We got power run to it. We tested it and we made sure it worked. Once again, everything on that is done. We are just missing a 100 amp breaker. We got electrical boxes hung, and we got all the wire pulled for a circuit in the guest bedroom. So we did accomplish quite a bit. It kind of felt like it was slow going there for a while, but once again, that's just kind of the nature of this slog, where we just got to work through all these little things before the house is ready for sheetrock. But that's going to do it. So I appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned, and we'll catch you on the next one.